Hey y'all, it's your girl Samantha here, and today I am doing an emergency recording because apparently it's breaking news. The Biden administration is in talks to pay $450,000 per person to immigrants separated at the border. I repeat, the Biden administration, the Democrats, are in talks to pay $450,000 per person to immigrants separated at the border. Now, first of all, let me tell you guys, I am not surprised at all. I don't know if I said this in another video or what, but I know I told somebody that the Democrats, the government was going to pay these people for what they were doing to them. Let's not forget, these are illegal criminals. These are people who illegally came over into our country to begin with. That's why they're going through this at all. Let's not forget 500, 600 years of America separating African Americans from our families, whether it was through slavery, mass incarceration. Let's not forget how this government, this country, paid reparations to the white people, the former slave masters who were treasonous, who went to war against Abraham Lincoln, their own president and their country, to keep slavery going. And they later got reparations because of the slaves that they lost. I want to enter a list of people who've received reparations from this country. People that I am currently, black people, ADOS people, are currently paying our tax dollars to these groups of people. Yet we are still waiting for our checks. We're the reason America even has the money to pay anybody reparations. This country was built off the backs of our ancestors. 400 years of free labor. So let me show you the list of people, the list of the groups of people who've received reparations from America. Groups of people, I don't even know if America was even involved. And if we were, so what? If you can pay these people, then you can pay us. Why is it suddenly divisive when African Americans / ADOS, American descendants of slavery, say that we want our checks? We want what is owed to us. It is not a handout. It is not begging, as an African immigrant told me. It is not anything else except a debt owed and compensation for how you have treated African Americans of this country for 500 to 600 years and still treating us the same goddamn way. You're just giving it a different name. Okay, so here's a list of all the reparation settlements that America has paid out to different groups. We're going to go from the top. We'll just go from the top here because it's not an exact order. So we'll say, okay, 2019, America paid Germany $560 million. I'm sorry, reparations settlements. Okay, so we're going to say Germany, I don't know what the list is saying exactly. Payouts to spouses and their descendants. I'm assuming America paid out these payouts. But anyways, I think Germany paid this out, $560 million to Holocaust survivors and descendants in 2019. Netherlands in 2019 paid $8.5 million to Holocaust survivors and descendants. 2019, Krispy Kreme paid $11 million to Holocaust survivors. Are we hearing this? Do you guys hear programs? Are you hearing scholarships, affirmative action for these groups, for Jews? Because I don't hear that. I hear money. I hear money being passed from person to person. In Canada, 2017, $3.1 billion paid to the First Nations residential school survivors. 2016, USA, $492 million to 17 Native American tribes. 2015, USA paid out $4.4 million per person to 1979 Iranian hostages. 2015, the USA paid $12 million to Holocaust survivors. 2014, France paid $60 million to Holocaust survivors and their descendants. 2012, Canada paid, let me see here, $1.62 billion to First Nations residential school survivers. 2005, Canada paid $40 million to the First Nations residential school survivors. 2004, Canada paid $1.9 billion to First Nations residential school survivors. 1998, Canada paid $350 million to First Nation residential school survivors. 1948 to present, France, $6 billion to Holocaust survivors and descendants. 1954, USA, $15.3 million to Japan for nuclear fallout for 1954 nuclear testing. 1956 and 1995, USA, $43.2 million to inhabitants of Rongelap and Rongelcrete Islands in the Pacific for nuclear fallout. 1988, USA, $1.6 billion, $3.5 billion in 2019 to Civil Liberties Act of 1988. 2016, USA, $25,000 to surviving spouse children, $15,000 to rape on severe personal injury, $12,000 forced labor or a personal something, $10,000 to forced march, intermittent or hiding to evade intermittent. This is for the Guam War Claims Review Commission. All of these, pretty much most of these payouts I just named were paid out to spouses and or descendants. So even when people say, oh, slavery was a long time ago, it's not happening anymore, get over it. No, motherfuckers, you get over it. Because that's the last thing we're going to do is forget about what was done to us. Obama made a lot of these payments. He made 4 of the payments to Holocaust survivors, Iranian hostages, and Native American tribes, but yet he said that African Americans, because he is not African American, he said African Americans are not and should not receive reparations as money or in any way, shape, or form. Then you have 2021, USA tribal nations received $31 billion, a part of the American Rescue Plan Act from Biden.
Celia Rain Lowtree.
Some of the kids graduating from this high school today have a lot more to celebrate than getting their diploma. When they finish high school, they get given $200,000.
You've already got a car, Andrew. You don't need a Maserati.
They belong to the Ho-Chunk Nation, a Native American tribe that owns a string of casinos across Wisconsin. Ho-Chunk kids get a share of casino profits once they've graduated and turned 18. It's called their 18 money.
It's just like basically winning the lottery and you know you're gonna get it.
Cocaine, I was buying large quantities and people were asking me for $10,000, $20,000, and I was like, wow, I'm almost down to nothing.
And then I want you to line up in
It's the last day of term in Black River Falls, Wisconsin.
Put your middle name on there, your middle names, all middle names, junior, the third, whatever it is.
We've got the list of kids graduating here. Amazing names. Danielle White Thunder, Justice Hunter Blackhawk, Brent Miles Funmaker II. The Ho-Chunk kids have always got their share of tribal wealth when they turn 18. It's divided equally among the 7,000 tribes members. But since the Ho-Chunk started running casinos, the 18 money payouts has gone from $17,000 in the mid-90s to over $200,000 now. What's the first thing you're going to buy when you get the money?
Holy cow, like, my mind's gonna be so crazy. It's just like basically winning the lottery and you know you're gonna get it.
Do you know what you're going to spend it on?
For sure, car.
Yeah.
Do you know which car you're going to get?
It's Maserati.
Before they get their 18 money, these kids have to register and have a blood test to prove they're Ho-Chunk.
But I won't get 18 money.
Why not?
Because I'm 0.23% short and you have to be a quarter. Now I know that
You cannot tell me that that guy does not look Asian. I know that's completely off topic, but I'm so over everyone trying to act like Native American is not Asian. And you're basically white. You look like a white person.
Have to work for like money and everything, or is it just given to me?
I have a baby, and I was gonna get a house, and I'm getting my car on Tuesday.
So she already has a child. No one is talking about this, how irresponsible that is. But we're always talking about black women like we're the only ones that are doing things like this. I'm also noticing in the comment sections, no one's complaining about these people getting money. No one's saying it's divisive. No one is saying, you know, the most they're saying is, oh, don't give them money. They'll ruin it. But I don't even see that much in it as well either. I don't really see people saying that either. People are just, oh, they're getting the money. I'm so proud of them. I'm happy for them. But no one cares about African Americans. You know why? Because it's CRT. The fact that CRT, the critical race theory, education along those lines are not taught in our schools. People think it's perfectly okay the way African Americans are treated. So why aren't more of us speaking out for CRT? I just don't see more people that care. And that's why I haven't spoken out, because I'm like, where is everybody? I'm the only one that gets this. The connection. I'm talking to white people and they're like, well, everybody, including Biden. So I'm like, well, if we do this for you, give you reparations, we need to include Native Americans. Why the fuck would you include Native Americans in my reparations? You never include us in theirs, and they enslaved us.
My brother, he didn't really the only thing he spent was like a car, and that was it. And then he just blew everything.
What did he blow it on?
Like drugs and alcohol and all that.
How long did it take for him to go through all of the money?
Probably for like 2 months maybe.
2 months?
Yeah. And he just blew it all.
How does he feel about that now?
He passed away, so.
Okay, wow. She must have passed away young. Since 2001, kids have to graduate to get their 18.
So they basically gave him a lot of money. Her brother, he got the $200,000, and it's like, if you're giving that kind of money to every child in the same family, they should be millionaires by now. But instead, she's looking basic. Her brother blew the money on stupid shit, and he's dead. Yeah, whenever black people talk about reparations, everybody's talking about, oh, they're just going to get back to white people anyway. They're going to do this, they're going to do that. Does anyone have that conversation when they're giving money to these other groups of people? Does anyone care how they're spending it? No, they don't. They just give them the money. So black people need to get out of their own way talking about how black people are going to spend it. It doesn't matter. It's compensation for how we've been treated for 500 plus years. Get it? Get out of your own fucking way, because nobody wants you to get that money any more than you do. And the way black people talk crap about it and don't support it, they want the money. They don't want the money. They're louder than anyone else about being against reparations. It's disgusting. Everything black people fight for, we had to fight against our own people before we can even get past the other race, before we can even get to the other groups of people that aren't black. We got to fight against our own people who look like us. First, we got to fight against ADOS people, other ADOS people who think reparations is a handout. It took forever to get people past that because of lack of CRT, lack of any kind of real education, and in raggedy public school systems. And then you had to fight against all the black immigrants who are jealous, who don't get that with us having reparations, we can help them. Because ain't nobody else helping black immigrants except black people. But no, they're jealous and they're haters and they're looking silly. So then we got to go against them. Then you get to Native Americans who pretend they're victims, even though they've gotten reparations several different times, including like in this video, who act like, well, what about us? Then you got the Hispanics who came over illegally, who say, hey, what about us? Then you finally get to all the white folks who are like, wait, it's divisive. It won't be fair. Because then my cousin's uncle's brother, nephew is going to feel like he's poor and you're not anymore. So now he can't feel superior to you. Like, that's our problem. I don't know why for ADOS, it's never just, we did something wrong to you guys. Here's your money. Here's your compensation for what we did to you guys all these years. We're the most obvious who've had the biggest atrocity, biggest crimes against us, biggest hate crimes against us. But it's like pulling teeth to get our money. No one else has to wait forever either. They tell us a long time ago, is that our fault that you was taking forever to freaking pay? And give us our land back and everything else that we're owed? Because Abraham Lincoln wanted it done, you killed him. Remember that? Someone assassinated their own president because he was talking about 40 acres and a mule. Then you go behind our backs and you make a treaty with the Native Americans and leave us out of it. So it's our fault that you're too racist to care enough to turn around and pay us right away. That's our fault. Everybody else gets paid right away, but we have to wait for centuries. And we're still oppressed in different ways over and over and over again. And now they're trying to keep CRT out of our schools so they can continue to enslave us in different ways and just giving it a different name. I feel like I'm literally the only black parent and only black person who was shouting from the rooftops about CRT. I feel like no one else cares, or they don't get it. They don't understand it. Black people are always trying to find something wrong with everything. Oh, don't call it. I think I was listening to Reading the Sheets. Don't call it critical race theory. It's this and it. I don't care what it's called. I don't give two foots what it is called. I care what is being taught to the children in America so that we can finally get what is owed to us. Is that so freaking difficult to understand?
Money. Unsurprisingly, graduation rates for Ho-Chunk students have shot up. The non-Ho-Chunk kids aren't celebrating. How does it feel for you guys knowing that some of the people graduating are going to get all this money?
It sucks.
I'm so upset
Because
about it.
you know that we worked, not saying like I'm racist or anything, but sometimes you think you worked harder than they did, and just because they're graduating, they're getting money.
Are you a bit jealous?
Oh yeah.
A little bit. I mean,
And so this white kid, he should be getting reparations because, you know, he looks like he's half black. But this white girl is talking, we worked just as hard as they did. Like, why are they getting money? But that's not why they're getting money. It's because they were, quote unquote, oppressed at some point. Just like African Americans have been oppressed in this country. Except we have the wrong color skin. We're not white. So we don't get anything. Everyone else who's not black gets reparations. I don't know when people are going to realize that. The connection between the two. People ask questions, they don't understand. That's the difference. We're black and everyone else isn't. The Hispanics, the illegal immigrants, they're not black. Those motherfuckers are Asian. I don't care what anybody says. You're Asian or you're white. I don't be seeing no Afro-Latinos or Afro-Hispanics or whatever the hell they want to call themselves this week. I don't see them crossing no border like that. Majority of them people are white Asians. I don't even know. They look white to me. Or they're Asians. And to me personally, those illegal immigrants look the same race as the Native Americans. I want somebody to fucking tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. I want somebody to. I don't care how much this world is trying to enslave people and move people around, and people migrate and they immigrate and they interracially date. I don't care what people are doing. The genetics do not lie. Science does not lie. If I'm looking in your face and your eyes are slanted, you are Asian. And if you're dark skinned, you're a black Asian person. If you're light skinned, lighter, you're a white Asian person. And I'm really on the fence of not even giving people Asian as it is. I'm just ready to say everybody's either white or black. But the reason why I'm gonna put Asian in there is because white America has given Asian people an honorary white status. So even if someone is darker than me, and I'm dark skinned, if you have an Indian person from Pakistan or Afghanistan who's darker than me, that person is still from Asia, the continent of Asia. So America still sees that as an Asian person. So at the end of the day, they're ready to uplift anyone who's not black. So you can be a Haitian, you could be any type of black immigrant, you can be an ADOS person. They're not paying you no reparations. Do you see any black person anywhere in the world getting paid reparations? I'll wait. So while black immigrants are in my country acting a fool, being hateful on social media, showing their true colors, calling us akatas, etc., telling me to stop begging when I'm asking my own government for reparations, when I'm demanding reparations for my ancestors, this is not even a conversation for you. This is not your business. Why are you talking? I didn't go to your country and interfere with what you're doing with your government. You came to my country to try to get a leg up in life. You came to my country to build some wealth and build something off of what my ancestors built. You didn't stay in your dusty ass country. You came to America. This is my country. This is the only country I know. This is the only place my family has been for hundreds and hundreds of years. We don't know anything else. Does that have anything to do with being African? No, it doesn't. I'm proud to be African, of African heritage. Unlike Africans, a lot of Africans probably ain't even proud to be African. They're completely whitewashed. They're completely just lost in the sauce. Talking about Jesus and all this BS, wearing wigs or whatever. I'm proud to be of African descent. I know exactly where I came from, and I don't owe people any kind of explanation. This is my country. My government, they know what the fuck they did, and they owe us money. They owe us reparations. This is not a conversation. This is not a debate. I don't know why I keep seeing black immigrants talking about this. This is not your business. I don't care. You came over in the 90s. That's not giving you the right to talk about this. This has nothing to do with you. You can still be deported. I can't. That's the difference between you and me. Because this is not your country. It's my country. My country did something to my ancestors, and I want justice. Has nothing to do with you. And so I showed enough of this. You guys can check this out. I'll put it in the link in the description box below. If I don't, put it in comments if you're looking for it. Or you can email me at the blacknationnews@gmail.com. Let me move on from this video 1 second.
To know who she would like to have us target. I look in this legislation and I see it targeted to children. And that's why we're doing something for children that we've been trying to do now for 18 years. We're going to cut the poverty rate for children in half. That's targeting to me. Black farmers. One report yesterday said that this program will do more for black farmers than anything since the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That's targeting to me. This legislation targets children who need to get back in school. So they keep saying these general things, targeted. I suspect that if we were targeting the wealthy, they will be lining up to vote for it.
About those black farmers, as you know, Senator Lindsey Graham isn't pleased with how targeted it is for black farmers, and he has a different word than targeted. Here he is.
Let me give you an example of something that really bothers me. In this bill, if you're a farmer, your loan will be forgiven up to 120% of your loan, not 100%, but 120% of your loan if you're socially disadvantaged, if you're African American, some other minority. But if you're white person, if you're a white woman, no forgiveness. That's reparations.
What's your response? And is this a form of reparations?
Lindsey Graham is from South Carolina. He knows South Carolina's history. He knows what the state of South Carolina and this country has done to black farmers in South Carolina. They didn't do it to white farmers. We're trying to rescue the lives and livelihoods of people. He ought to be ashamed of himself. He knows the history in this country.
Okay, so first of all, this is not reparations. This is a reconciliation of things that were done incorrectly. Reparations is going to be completely separate. But even if it was reparations, what's wrong with that? And third of all, Lindsey Graham is saying it's reparations, but he said himself he didn't want to say it clearly, but he just said that the money was going to be for black farmers, socially disadvantaged, and minorities. So it's not just reparations for African Americans. Once more, we are pushed into a group, a BIPOC, POC, people of color fucking group. We're lumped in with everybody else. No one's getting lumped in with the illegal immigrants who are getting their $450,000 per person. Maybe I should fucking become a Mexican and run my ass across the border and then get separated. Is that the only way I'm going to get some reparations? And then I still won't get it because I have black skin.
And he knows what has happened to black farmers. The lawsuit that we've never been able to rectify. We've had so much recalcitrance.
Clyburn is so full of shit to me because he does not believe African Americans should be getting reparations. Oh yeah, here it is right here. He doesn't believe that African Americans even should be getting reparations. So I don't know why he's suddenly trying to pound his fist and act like he's trying to do the right thing by black people. And it's interesting to me because I'm like, are you only caring about these black farmers because you look like one of them and you sound like an old country? Because you sure ain't thinking about other ADOS peoples in America and how we're suffering in the ghettos, in the cities, in the hood, in the suburbs, wherever else we're at. And we're not farmers. Where's our reparations checks? Where's our money? And this is not reparations to... I don't believe they're getting money. They're forgiving loans. That's not reparations. Every time when it's for black people, it's always some program, some bullshit program that we have to qualify for. Everybody else gets cash in hand. We're always getting these freaking programs. We don't want your programs.
HR 40. Are you supportive of the bill?
Yes, I am. I've always supported it. Now, I'm told I didn't sign on the bill last year. But when I first got up here, that HR 40, I don't know what the number may have been back then. I came here in 93, but the issue was being pushed by John Conyers. Right. And I talk to Conyers about that often. So that has been around, and I've been here 26 years. So this issue has been around for that long. And it calls for the creation of a commission to study reparations. So I support that. But now my question to everybody that I have this discussion with, what do I do in the meantime? Do we sit back and wait until we get the 218 votes that are necessary to create a commission and then wait on the commission to do whatever it's going to do and make recommendations? Is that going to take another 26 years? And then we've lost 2 generations. We have lost a generation since I've been here. And I told our friends in the NAACP, one or two of them got upset with me when I said to them that we were making a big mistake allowing affirmative action to be defined as quotas and preferences. And that's what happened to affirmative action. To me, affirmative action was a form of reparations. Yeah. So what we're doing with reparations now, if we let reparations be defined as cash subsidies only, you know, if you say we want to create a commission to study the issue and make recommendations, why are we turning the whole campaign on cash subsidies? That's where we're going to lose this argument. So I've said to people, I support the study, but while they're studying, here's some things that we can do. And if you look up the word reparations, it means to make amends. Right. The root word is repair. Yes, sir. You know, I studied this stuff, and one of the great historians, French historian who wrote the book Democracy in America, concluded in one part of that book that America's greatness is not because it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because we have always been able to repair our faults. Reparation is to repair a fault. So how do we repair the fault?
So the interesting thing to me, of course, Clyburn is talking about a bunch of nothing. He's running around in circles like politicians do. He's talking about nothing. We are not repaired. ADOS has not been repaired. African Americans and Native foundational Black Americans who are from this country, who've been here since the fucking 1600s, we are still impoverished. We're still struggling. You do have this elitist class of the black bourgeoisie that's like maybe the 1%, but the majority, like the 99% of African Americans who are descendants of slavery that happened in this country, that built this country, we're not repaired. Not only are we not repaired, but things are still happening to us. Things are still being allowed to happen to us. Our schools are shit. They do not teach the truth. So everyone's able to repackage over and over the same slavery and just give it a different name. So Black Americans, African Americans, ADOS are basically still being enslaved over and over and over. Where is the repairment in that?
In education. How do we repair the fault in what I might call housing or the infrastructure development? One of the big issues that we have in communities that are still suffering under the legacy of slavery. I represent these communities. And
yes, we know what Clyburn represents, don't we? So let's go ahead and see the district that Clyburn represents, and let's see how they're doing, his Black constituents, how they're living, shall we? Oh, isn't that shocking? I type in Jim Clyburn, and for some reason I thought he was coming out of North Carolina. He's actually in South Carolina, which is interesting because that's the first thing he was talking about was those farmers, those Black farmers getting those loans forgiven in South Carolina, and he was feeling so happy about that. And it's interesting because apparently he will most likely some way, somehow benefit from this because he is a congressman from South Carolina. They said Clyburn has served as the U.S. representative for South Carolina's 6th congressional district since 1993. Where is his district? The population is, as of 2019, 665,215 people. Median household income, $41,000. Does that sound like it's thriving, guys? It's 57% Black, 35% white, 4.4% Hispanic, 1.5% two or more races, 1% Asian, 0.5% other. So basically the majority of his district is African Americans. Just to put it bluntly, they're descendants of slaves. That's who's in the South of America, descendants of slaves. Okay, remember that was the South that was fighting the North to keep slavery going because of agriculture and farming, and we were the ones sharecropping and tending to the farms so that we could make America great. So his people are median household income, they are considered in poverty. Okay, so we have that. And I would love to look at the educational system in his district. Let's look at the schools. And I'm laughing because I've already looked all this stuff up, so I already know their schools are crap. So let's jump on in here. Their high school graduation rates, 77.8%. College graduation rate, 16.4%. And on here, it actually brings their median household income down to $31,000. The unemployment rate, 16.4% of people are unemployed. Does that sound like thriving to you guys? Because it doesn't sound like thriving, like they're just not in poverty. They're just doing great. They've been repaired. It doesn't sound like that to me. It doesn't sound like anyone's been repaired. So these are just some to put Allendale, Bamberg, Calhoun, Clarendon, Hampton, Jasper, Williamsburg counties. District is also including Beaufort, Berkeley, Charleston, Colton, Dorchester, Florence, Orangeburg, Richland, and Sumter counties. Okay, and just in case you guys live in those counties, you know what to be doing when it's time to vote. Let's see what else we have going on here. So in the last general election, I want to say it was in 2020, Clyburn won by 68.2%. So either people are not voting, but it looks like people are voting overwhelmingly for him. They are loving what Clyburn is not doing, which is a bunch of nothing. And those votes went to Republicans in 2020. Maybe people are starting to wake up a little bit, hopefully. And it's a struggle. I'm not going to lie. It is a struggle because I wanted to get Nina to win in Ohio, and they brought in this bootleg black person, this establishment black woman to run against her. They threw all their money behind her. The whole Democratic machine got behind this sellout, and she won. So that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do. When they feel like they're about to lose, they find someone who looks like us, who probably is an immigrant, and they put them up against ADOS peoples and put all their money, the ads, the attack ads, everything. They put it all against us so that we can lose, and they don't have that person in Congress fighting for us, like an ADOS person who actually cares. So in all these elections, Clyburn is basically winning in a landslide. And see, this would not be my problem if he only affected South Carolina. But the thing that people have to realize is people in Congress make the laws. So you have to care about voting down ballot, because they sit their asses in Congress and they say things like, we don't need reparations. That's what these people are saying. They're not just affecting South Carolina at this point. They're now affecting all of ADOS. That's a problem. And he is just winning 71.8% in 2000, 67% in 2002, 68.2% of the vote in 2004, 64.4% vote in 2006, 67.5% in 2008, 62.9% in 2010, 93.6% of the vote in 2012, 72.5% in 2014. I'm laughing so I don't cry. 70.1% in 2016. And in 2018, he got 70.1. And then 2020, he got 68.2. So the next one will be coming up next year. You guys just mark your calendars and remember that. They said this was held on November 3rd, 2020 is when the general election occurs. All right, so let's come out of here. It's getting like a lot of high ratings. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. 59% white in Spartanburg. Are we surprised, guys? No, we're not. So basically, as I've already told you guys, I already researched Clyburn years ago because I can't stand him, and I wanted to learn more about him. And basically, the white side of his district is thriving. The black side, not so much. So I don't know if white people are voting for him over and over because he's giving them everything they want, or I don't know. I haven't broken that down. But he is just very loved in his district, and I don't know why. So 25% they say are in poverty. 8% of senior citizens are in poverty. This is in Spartanburg, I think, or they might just be talking about all of South Carolina at this point. I mean, I want to say they're talking about Spartanburg School District 6. 70,000 people, and 59% white, 24% is black. I already knew that was the case because when you look at it, you see all these high scores and you're like, wow, like, why are all these 5 stars for a black school? That's shocking. And then you find out it's not so black. So I was like, okay, that makes more sense. There's the South Carolina district schools. If you look at the African American, hold on a second. I still have Spartanburg in there, and I need to get them out of Spartanburg so I can look at the other counties and how they're quote unquote thriving. Let's see here. So when did South Carolina desegregate schools? In 1963. What percent of South Carolina is black? 27.3% is black. Okay. Let's look up children's arrest.
The video disturbing. A 16-year-old female high school student being forcefully ripped from her chair, handcuffed, and removed from class.
Give me your hands. Give me your hands.
The school resource officer, Ben Fields, a deputy with Richland County Sheriff's Department since 2004, has, for now, been removed from his duties at Spring Valley High School.
I want to throw up. I mean, it's literally, it just makes you sick to your stomach when you see that initial video.
More of the disturbing encounter can be heard on a second video clip.
You don't know me? Okay, you're done with me or am I going to make you? Come on. I'm going to get you up. Give me your hands.
A video shows the young woman striking the officer as he begins to remove her from the room.
It just shows that as when the officer puts his hands on her initially, she reaches up and she pops the officer with her fist. But again, does that justify the means? Does that justify what we did? And that's what I have to look at.
But what happened before the video started recording? Why would a deputy who received the district's highest honor last year use such force? One student in the room writes on social media, the officer in this is a cool dude. He is not racist. Girl was asked to put her phone away, but told teacher no. An administrator was called, asked her to come to his office. She told him no, and then called the resource officer. When he got there, he asked her nicely to get up over and over. He did nothing wrong. The incident has caused anger and revived long-held concerns about the treatment of young African Americans in the school district here.
And what about the student resource officers, school resource officers? We really have to take a look at this because they're arresting more people in school than they are in the streets. That cannot be.
The local ACLU chapter notes school discipline, everything from arrests to expulsions and suspensions, is disproportionate. 61% of African Americans receiving such discipline compared with 29% of white students.
So that doesn't feel very reparative at all.
When I look in the counties, these rural counties, Jasper and Hampton and Allendale, I want to move in there now with programs to repair some faults.
So for black people, for ADOS, it's always programs. Illegal immigrants, $450,000 per person. ADOS, programs. Illegal immigrants, money. ADOS, the people who built the country, the descendants of the people who built the country, and who've gone through the worst tragedy known in the most history that we can remember. We get programs.
We'll have an infrastructure bill that hangs around with roads and bridges rather than looking at water and sewage, rather than looking at broad.
And as someone said in the comments, I'm going to allow these comments to be shown in my video. The things he's talking about should be fixed anyway because of the taxes we pay. Because you're the government and Americans should not be living with a bunch of sewage problems and whatever else infrastructure you're talking about. That's just things that should just be happening because we are American citizens and we shouldn't be living in filth. But because we're poor, because of being descendants of slavery and never receiving reparations on top of that, we are left to live in the worst conditions imaginable, like we're living in a third world country in our own country. And his ideal of reparations is to fix the things that should not have been messed up to begin with. That should be just a given, that I'm living and getting clean water, like in Flint, Michigan, where their water was undrinkable and killing people. I should be able to live in an environment that's safe and healthy for me because I'm living in a first world country. But I'm living in a first world country that my ancestors built while living in squalor in third world country conditions. And now you're lifting illegal immigrants who aren't even supposed to be in this country. You're lifting them out of poverty by giving them $450,000, but we're getting programs. Make that make sense.
And deployment, rather than looking at those things we need to do to improve these communities. This is repairing the fault. So all after my 10, 20, 30.
Yes.
Saying that it's 10% of the money in this category must be spent in those areas where 20% or more of the population is stuck beneath the poverty level for the last 30 years. That's repairing a fault. That's closing a gap. That is making these communities.
Nothing he's doing is closing a gap. No. Nope. Nope. Fixing the pipes, the sewage pipes underground does not repair a racial wealth gap. Anyone with half a brain, which is really hard to find that in this country where our schooling is shit, but anyone with any kind of sense would know that the only way to fix what was done to us is to give us money. There's not enough programs in the world that would repair what happened to African Americans in this country. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And we're not, and then to put on top of the fact that everybody and their mama, every my quote unquote minority, anyone who can call themselves a minority can jump into those programs with us and suck out the little bit of slots that are available. How is that justice for what happened to our ancestors? Why is everybody allowed to jump in and say, I'm black too, even though I'm from Ghana or Nigeria or some shit, even though I sold black people, these same people, into slavery? I get to be them now and pretend to be them, which is fraudulent, should be considered fraud, and get their scholarships, get their spots in these schools. Why should there even have to be spots for us? If we had reparations, which is with money, because that's what reparations is for everyone else, for us, it's programs. You're giving 18-year-old Native Americans $200,000 each, who's blowing it up their noses, but with us, it's programs. Why don't you give their asses some programs? Why do they have casinos? Why are they able to make all this money with their casinos and their land that you've given them, and they're basically a sovereign nation? They're just living the good life, and it's not our fault you don't know how to build with what all that you've been given, Native Americans. We're still waiting for our money. I want money in the bank. I want a check. I want money. I don't want infrastructure. That's your fucking problem, U.S. government. That's what you're supposed to be doing anyway. That ain't got nothing to do with me. Why is everything that fixes the problems for ADOS, it fixes everybody? It fixes it for everyone's always lumped in. So if you're black, please stop using people of color. Please stop lumping yourself with a bunch of other groups of people that ain't got shit to do with you, don't care about you, never fought for you, and never will.
Better prepared for economic development issues. That's making the schools, giving schools the ability to have safe drinking water. There are schools in my district where the water is unfit for human consumption. So I'm saying to all my friends, we ought to be able to run.
And let me say, by the way, this guy that's interviewing Jim Clyburn, he was installed into this conversation by Joy Reid. He's Joy Reid's little friend. I think he had some radio show that is now defunct probably. And she found him from the woodworks. No one knows who he is, what he stands for. We don't know him from a box of paint. And he comes in having a discussion. And I'm looking, I don't even know his name at all. And it's like, who are you? They only have 3,600 subscribers. in 2 years. 924 views of this video. 145 thumbs down, over 15 thumbs up. I bet all the people that are thumbsing up are either black immigrants or they're white. When I say white, I mean Asian, all the Asians too. I'm lumping them in there. Indians, all them people. But yeah, this guy was installed by black immigrant Joy Reid. She comes from Immigrants. And so he's more than happy to hear Jim Clyburn say he's going to give African Americans a bunch of programs. I don't know where he comes from, but you still got the bootlegs, and that's what I mean. ADOS has to get through so much bullshit before we can get to even fighting the actual enemy. That's what they call the buffer class. This is what the black media accurately calls the buffer class. There's like these groups that are put in between ADOS and the government, and they're like the gatekeepers. They stand in between. They get their butter biscuits. They get their couple of little pennies that's thrown at them to keep ADOS in our place, to keep us from getting to the actual real enemy.
A two-track program here. Yes, let's create the commission. Let's do the study. Let's wait on the recommendations. But in the meantime, let's put these water systems in. Let's repair these schools, and let's...
I'm trying my best not to laugh. He's calling... This clown is calling clean water in schools reparations. I can't. I cannot even understand this. I can't wrap my head around this. All I can hear is racism. All I can see is the number $450,000 going to people who shouldn't have been in the country to begin with, and the people who actually built the descendants of the people who actually built the country, still waiting for our checks. But we get clean water in our schools finally. How long was that water unclean? That's a crime in and of itself for another day.
Get rid of the student debt. Let's fund these HBCUs. Let's fund especially the 1890 schools, the land-grant schools, where states are refusing to put up their share of the land-grant money, and nobody's talking about it. And I'm a graduate of one, South Carolina State, and the state of South Carolina has not put up the state share of the land-grant money in years. And I bet you have not seen a single headline about that. And I've been talking about it, and everybody says, well, let's tell them to send the check. Okay. I'll tell them.
Speaking of South Carolina, some people are kingmakers. You are a president maker, because people come through South Carolina at the end of February every 4 years. And lately, South Carolina has pretty much decided what is going to happen. And you have often had an indirect say in that, with the fish fry and everything else, right? Amen. So what do you predict the same influence in terms of your state, February 28, 2020, and what are you saying? How is it looking? I know the candidates are going there. I think Corey's there tonight for a town hall. So South Carolina, from your point of view, at least from mine, still has the same juice, doesn't it?
Well, I hope so. In fact, Corey is at the land-grant school tonight in South Carolina State.
That's right.
The fact of the matter is, I'm trying hard for all of these presidential candidates to understand a little bit about the Democratic electorate.
Okay, so we're going to move away from him because he's going to talk about whatever. He basically gave the election to Biden, who was nowhere near the running of winning anything. And so we're just going to stay on topic and jump to Kamala Harris. reparations. It's funny when I type in reparations, it just disappears. Where are the results?
Do you support reparations for black people?
Well, listen, again, we had over 200 years of slavery. We had Jim Crow for almost a century. We had legalized discrimination and segregation, and now we have...
I love when politicians are asked questions, and instead of them just answering the question directly, they start giving you a history lesson. Isn't that wonderful?
Segregation and discrimination that is not legal but still exists and is a barrier to progress.
And might I add, this is a woman whose father is Jamaican, her mother is Indian, Brahmin Indian, one of the wealthiest classes of Indian, and she was raised, I want to say, majority of the time in Canada. So again, we're having this theme here, this vicious cycle of people who are not even ADOS talking about ADOS problems and being in a position to do things to block ADOS from winning. So the whole time we've been focusing on white people, I mean, apparently black immigrants haven't been much of our friends either, because Obama's father is from Kenya, so he also is not ADOS. He doesn't have the ADOS lineage. His mom is the American, and she was white. So
we have disparities around housing. We have disparities around education. We have disparities around income. And we have to recognize that everybody did not start out on an equal footing in this country. And in particular, black people have not. And so we have got to recognize that and do something about that and give folks a lift up. That's why, for example, I'm proposing the LIFT Act. Give people who are making $100,000 or less as a family a tax credit, which will benefit and uplift 60% of black families who are in poverty.
So by default, it affects black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit black children, black families, black homeowners, because the disparities are so significant. So if we focus on the specific issues that have resulted in the greatest disparities, and we understand that that's part of why we're doing it. Listen, the reality also is this: any policy that will benefit black people will benefit all of society. Let's be clear about that. Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No, because whatever benefits that black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country. Right?
All right, so there you go with Kamala, our current vice president. I did not vote for her, but black people put these people in office. So let's go ahead and see Obama and what he thought about reparations. And remember, Obama was the president of our current president. Oh, let me play this. Can the U.S. afford reparations?
The current level of conversation about reparations, particularly on the national stage, is probably greater than anything that might have been taking place in the United States since the Reconstruction era.
Reparations as a way to make amends for the atrocities of slavery and to reduce the persistent wealth gap has recently gained momentum.
$14 trillion in reparation is an appropriate statement.
Black Americans possess 2.6% of the nation's wealth, but make up 13% of the population.
That racial wealth gap is a starting place for any reparations program.
A number of states, towns, and institutions have begun to grapple with the idea. As of August 12, 142 Congress members have co-sponsored H.R. 40, the bill that establishes a commission to study reparations. That is compared to only 2 in 2014. Even Joe Biden has said he supports the bill, but a real program could be costly.
This hardly seems the time to burden the economy with more debt, more taxes. Essentially, what you want to do is stimulate economic growth for all our benefits.
This is not small money. This is $1 trillion that we're talking about, more or less. Separate social program for this entity that you've carved out, that you've called black people. I'm against that.
The U.S. is far from a concrete national compensation plan. Still, months of racial justice protests push the concept to the center of the national debate. In the event that it becomes a reality, what would a potential reparations program look like? And can the U.S. afford it? Black Americans lag behind whites in almost every category of economic well-being. They are far less likely to be employed, own their home, inherit money, accumulate wealth, and earn as much as white counterparts. The median net worth of a white household is $171,000. For blacks, it's just a bit over $17,000.
There's the whole ecosystem of segregation having created the lack of opportunity ladders, whether it's through underfunded schools, over-policed neighborhoods. We have embedded residential home values in race. So your home is worth more if you live in a mostly white neighborhood.
The best we can do is, in fact, to erase racial wealth differences in the United States by building black asset positions to a level that is similar to the average wealth that's held by white Americans.
What do we want? Reparations! What do we want? Now!
Though reparations has been studied, practicality has often taken a backseat to morality. Scholars who have worked on calculating compensation don't always agree. For about 30 years, William Darity has discussed the rationale and design of reparations. Today, he says it will cost the United States government between $10 trillion and $12 trillion. To put that in perspective, in 2019, the US GDP was about $21.5 trillion.
The share of wealth in the possession of black Americans ought to match, at least match, the share of the population.
A more conservative estimate looks at the 40 million acres that should have been allocated to the 4 million freed men. The present value of that land is about $1.5 to $2 trillion. If about 35 million black Americans are eligible, the minimum estimate would amount to between $40,000 and $60,000 per person. Darity argues that as the culpable party, the government needs to foot the bill.
The federal government has the capacity to create new resources in this way. Congress could direct the Federal Reserve to create a fund of some sorts as well, either as a complement or as the entire basis for funding this project, especially since it can be conducted over the course of 10 years. But I think that the one thing that we have to be very careful about with any new federal expenditure program is what are the inflationary risks.
All government money has to come from somewhere else. Now, it could sort of borrow that money, essentially print it, which right now the interest rates are very low, but they're not going to always be. And we do have long-run obligations in terms like Social Security and Medicare that we're going to have to meet someday. So, and we're running up huge deficits and huge amounts of debt in order to deal with the COVID crisis. Given all of that, simply adding more debt on top of it doesn't strike me as being a particularly fiscally prudent course of action.
Inflation and the cost of adding to the national debt are two of the biggest barriers to extending or expanding federal programs. To avoid inflation, Darity proposes trust accounts, or some form of an endowment where the recipient can spend a percentage of the money on an annual basis and keep the rest in an interest-earning account.
The idea is that the amounts of those direct payments should be sufficient to eliminate racial wealth differences in the course of a decade. We think that the delivery of funds to individuals is the most precise and accurate way to address the wealth differential.
And wealth does not fall from the sky. It's not as if there exists a fixed amount of wealth that's simply there and we have to decide who has it. Wealth is created. Wealth is generated. The real issue here are differences between the populations in the capacity to generate wealth. If you redistribute, you may have a short-term impact. But in the long run, unless the differences in these populations, in their capacity to generate wealth, to start business, to effectively take risks, to save and accumulate within their families, unless those factors are addressed, the underlying structure will push you back into a situation of inequality again.
It can simply tax that money, in which case you're simply taking money out of the pockets of some people and putting it in pockets of other people. That's not increasing wealth at all. That is simply, now it will make some people better off who don't have savings and don't have financial assets today, but it's going to come at the expense of the economy as a whole.
Compensation programs can take many forms. In 1988, descendants of Japanese Americans forced into internment camps during World War II received $20,000 each. Germany has paid over $70 billion to more than 800,000 Holocaust victims. Reparations programs for descendants of slaves could adopt a single method or several at once. One example is baby bonds. While the idea won't replace reparations, Derek Hamilton argues that they can act as a powerful complement. These accounts would be targeted at poor children and help them pay for college, buy a home, or start a business.
One is a retrospective economic and racial justice program to pay a debt and also close the racial wealth gap. And the other one is prospective in the sense that it ensures that in a race-conscious way, everyone will in perpetuity have access to capital, and it works towards mitigating concentrations in the future of wealth.
According to Hamilton, baby bonds would increase by a guaranteed annual rate of 2%, and the initial deposit would be between $25,000 and $60,000, depending on the financial situation of the child. One study argues the policy could decrease the racial wealth gap by more than tenfold.
It's based on the presumption that there are about 4 million babies born each year, and if you seeded every account at about $25,000, then 25 times 4 million, and then you add some infrastructure cost of running the program. So the baby bonds would cost less than $100 billion a year, and then one could talk about that in the scale of what we currently spend. So $100 billion is about 2% of federal expenditures now. It is much less than we spend with our tax policy on subsidizing the assets of the wealthy. So if one were to think about the cost of baby bonds, the scale of other asset expenditures, it pales in comparison.
This is sort of a precursor of a universal basic income in the sense that it's going to people regardless of qualifications. It may have some means testing to it. It may not, depending on how the program is actually played out.
The country has been discussing reparations one way or another since slavery officially ended in 1865. But the protests following George Floyd's killing have thrusted racial inequality to the forefront. According to a recent Reuters poll, 1 in 5 Americans support the idea that the country used taxpayer money to pay damages to descendants of slaves. A 2019 Gallup poll found that 29% are in favor of such a program. In that same survey, 16% of whites were in favor of cash payments.
The number has to be put in context because when Michael Dawson and Ravana Popov did a survey in the year 2000 about American attitudes towards reparations, they found that only 4% of white Americans were in favor of reparations for black Americans. And so it does represent somewhat of a sea change from the proportion that existed in the year 2000. We also have evidence that close to half of millennials are actually in favor of reparations for black Americans. We may be in a moment where the conversation can be pushed forward in a far more positive way.
If you want to tackle problems of disadvantage and social exclusion, don't do it in terms of race. I think that's very bad for the country. I think it's the wrong way to think about social obligation to each other. We're not tied to each other because we belong to these different racial groups.
Even if you don't care about justice for Black Americans, I think if you care about the soul of America, reparations will heal all of us.
Local efforts to fund reparations are starting.
And she basically, the last woman from Irvine, I think, California, she basically said what Marianne Williamson was saying in the platform she ran on when she ran for president. So let's look at this guy, this clown here. Complete sellout.
The wrong way to think about social obligation to each other. We're not
to apologize for slavery and offer
far more positive way.
If you want to tackle problems of disadvantage and social exclusion, don't do it in terms of race.
He's talking about taking race off the table when that's what the country's built off of. So let me go ahead and read this article. It says the Biden administration is considering giving $450,000 per person to immigrants separated at the border. This was published 8 hours ago. So the Biden administration could pay out up to $1 billion to immigrant families that were separated at the U.S.-Mexico border during the Trump administration. According to the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. Departments of Justice, Homeland Security, and Health and Human Services could end up paying out close to $1 million per immigrant family that were 1 million per immigrant family that were separated at the border. Sources told WSJ that around $450,000 a person is being considered, but could change depending on each family's circumstances. And I want to say, where is this money coming from? Is this our tax dollars? Where's the outrage from white people who say they don't want to pay their tax dollars to pay reparations to ADOS? So discussions of payouts have taken place over the course of the past few months between lawyers representing immigrant families that are suing the federal government and the government's own lawyers. According to WSJ, some government lawyers apparently viewed the payout amounts as excessive. Margot Schlanger, DHS officer for civil rights and civil liberties during the Obama administration, told WSJ, damaged class actions in this kind of case are pretty rare. It's hard to think of a recent comparison. The American Civil Liberties Union's ACLU is representing multiple families in a lawsuit over the Trump administration's zero tolerance policy. In January, it issued a statement urging the incoming Biden administration to act quickly on the issue. So it's like 500 years and ADOS is still waiting for their reparations, but these people have been done wrong for a few years, and they get to act quickly to get their payouts, their compensation, their reparation, their reparative justice for what they have endured, which is nowhere near the type of tragedies that our families have endured, to the point where we don't even know where our family members have been buried. Our parking lots buried over their bodies, and while they lay in mass graves. These are all the things that African American ADOS people are still figuring out while they're paying illegal immigrants money for coming over here illegally and then being separated from their families, while we're being separated from our families as well, because we have people that have been mass incarcerated. Most people are in jail and they're innocent. So they've been illegally put in jail. Then you have people who are in jail for selling weed, marijuana, whatever you want to call it, while white boys are becoming billionaires selling the same product, the same drug. Make that make sense, guys. And we want to say America's not racist. I beg to differ. So the incoming administration must reunite the separated families in the United States, but we cannot stop there. Nobody's reunited African Americans with their families. These families deserve citizenship, resources, care, and a commitment that family separation will never happen again. So they're getting more than ADOS is getting, a promise to never be separated again, as we are still separated from our loved ones. So since assuming, because no one has reunited African Americans with our ancestors. I don't know where any of my ancestors are buried. When I go and look on Ancestry.com, I can't find my ancestors past 1865 on the black side. So where is the reconnection for us? Where's the resources and the care for us? And a lot of this they're talking about as far as resources and care, these people are already enjoying. It's called the welfare system. They're already draining the system, living off the system, and they're over here illegally, might we still remember, because everyone seems to forget that they should not even be over here to begin with. So you're basically rewarding their crime with giving them more than you've given the people who actually built the country and who are actual citizens of this country. So since assuming office, the Biden administration created, and honestly, I want to also add, Black Americans, African Americans, ADOS are not really even considered full-fledged American citizens. The way that they treat us and how no one's ever being brought to justice for slavery, for police brutality, for mass incarceration, for all these hangings that they're claiming are suicides. There's so many crimes that have been committed against African Americans, and no one is ever being held accountable. But yet you're sitting here saying that these people deserve citizenship, resources, care, and a commitment to never separate their family again. Where's all of that care for African Americans? Where is it? Why are we still waiting? Why are we still waiting? That argument is getting old, talking about find somebody who's alive. So I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit who's still alive. America's still alive. America is still thriving and doing well on the backs of my ancestors. You would not be enjoying anything that you have if it wasn't for black slavery. So since assuming office, the Biden administration created the Interagency Task Force on the Reunification of Families, and its latest progress report, released in September, confirmed it had reunified 50 children separated from their parents and provided access to behavioral health services. Another 2,171 children have been reunified through a court order and from the efforts of non-governmental organizations. However, the same report confirmed 1,727 children have not yet been reunified. That's really not that big of a number. I want to know how many black children are locked up right now. with their families, accounting for 33% of all those identified as separated from their parents by DHS under the Trump administration's zero tolerance policy. The ACLU is still battling this lawsuit with the Biden administration, and according to WSJ, not all the families it's representing will be eligible for a potential financial settlement. The Office of the Inspector General conducted a review of the DOJ's zero tolerance policy and found that under former Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the agency failed to effectively prepare for or manage the implementation of the zero tolerance policy. So let's go and see, what does the GOP feel when it comes to reparations for ADOS. So that's the Republican side, because for something like this to pass, most likely it's going to have to take an act of Congress. So that means the Democrats and the Republicans are going to most likely have to approve this. Okay, so you have California Republicans saying, you know, reparations for African Americans is divisive. Are reparations evil? Here's why these Californians say they could be necessary. So Representative Tom McClintock sees the effort to study reparations for African Americans whose ancestors endured slavery as bitterly divisive. Seriously? So trying to repair a race of people who you have wronged for centuries is divisive. That's interesting. I never knew that trying to repair, trying to right a wrong, trying to offer some type of reparative justice, because you can never ever fully repay us for what has been done to us. We have lost our culture. We have lost our country. We have lost our families. We've lost everything by being kidnapped and brought to this country to build this country. We are treated like third-class citizens at this point, because now Hispanics are quote-unquote outnumbering us, which doesn't help, because everybody's telling black women to not have children, like other black women are telling black women not to have children. So our numbers will continue to dwindle. We've been sitting at 13% since like the 1800s, might I add. And that number might be going down, because apparently black people still don't understand their strength in numbers. So it doesn't matter what kid you're having, just have them and raise them properly. Then you have black males who act like they can't get their fucking head out their asses. They're sitting here not raising their kids. They're running off, being bummed, making kids with a bunch of different women. What is wrong with people? Yes, we got dealt a shitty hand, but do we need to sit here and make it worse for ourselves? Pull it together. God, just like we keep doing the wrong things. We keep worshiping the wrong things, like sex and just degeneracy and guns and violence, and we're just doing the wrong things. And then the things we really should be focusing on, like education for our children, and just really uplifting black children. I feel like black children are just so hated by every group, including their own people. We hate each other. That's why we don't like our offspring, because they look like us. They're little miniature versions of us that's going to grow up to be us. And we can't stand it. So much self-hate. Then we keep voting as Democrats like a bunch of idiots. When have the Democrats ever done anything for black people? I argue with my sister for like an entire year. And then I argue with my entire family. Like, why are you voting for Biden? Why? Like, vote for anyone. Vote for Marianne Williamson. Vote for, write ADOS in. These people who don't even care enough to pay attention to what the hell is going on around them. They run into the polls and they vote for this clown who is just constantly slapping African Americans in the face by continuing to do things for every other group except the people who put his ass in office. Clyburn is guilty because he turned the whole primary around and basically handed the election, the Democratic nomination to Biden. Biden wasn't even in the fucking running. He wasn't even in the running. He was way at the bottom somewhere. Anybody would have been better than him. Jesus, like, when are black people going to get it? So it's designed to reach into the dead past, revive his conflicts, and then reintroduce them into our age. The California Republican said, I think all Americans are goodwill, regardless of their race, have had enough of this nonsense. Please stop tearing this country apart. No, this country will stay torn apart until you pay us our money and you give us the justice that we deserve. I am tired of pretending, and I'm tired of black people pretending that we're all getting along. This is why I cannot date outside my race. I don't care what black guys are doing. I refuse to date outside my race and date the descendants of the people that owned my ancestors. I won't do it. So Representative Zoe Lofgren, and that doesn't mean that I'm for black males. Don't get it twisted. Do not get it twisted. I will probably go to another country if I have to and find a husband or whatever I'm doing whenever I finally care to do that. But black males are totally, I'm done with them as well. I'm done with black males as well because I'm tired of how you treat black women. I'm tired of the lack of protection that black women don't receive from you guys. You don't protect us, and then you, on top of that, you turn around and you're abusing us. It went from every 9 hours a black woman is dead, killed because of domestic violence to every 6 hours. And then people want to say, well, not all bad black men are bad. It's kind of like saying like not all cops are bad. But where are they when when the other group is doing bad things? When the bad side is doing bad things, where's the good side? We're all waiting. So this person put, it's not about who's to blame. It's about who was denied opportunities and how do we look at making sure everybody in America is treated fairly. The way you can make sure everyone in America is treated fairly is by closing the racial wealth gap, by paying African Americans reparations and giving us back our land that you stole from us. 40 acres and a mule and some checks. That's how you fix it. That's how you treat everybody fairly. Because you gave all these slave owners who were treasonous and ran through the country committing war and bloodshed because they wanted to keep slavery going, which is an atrocity, something that should have never been happening to begin with. You give them back you give them money for property they lost because now apparently my ancestors are fucking property. We're not humans. But yeah, you're sitting here talking about, oh, we want to treat you fairly. No, the only way it will be fair is to give me my goddamn money because my ancestors should have never been chattel slavery property to begin with. And all those clowns, instead of putting them in prison for being treasonous and having slaves, etc., you gave them reparations. You paid them. So what's fair is fair. You pay them, you pay us. How about that for fair? So their split reflected the stark division between Republicans and Democrats over the reparations issue. The House Judiciary Committee took an historic step late Wednesday when it approved legislation to create the commission. The Judiciary Committee, which approved the bill 25-17, has 7 Californians. Republicans McClintock and Representative Darrell Issa voted no. Democrats Lofgren, Ted Lieu Correa, Karen Bass, and Eric Swalwell voted yes. So these are the people who remember to continue to vote for them. So this is an unusually delicate issue, even for some Democrats. It's unclear when it could come to a full debate and vote in the Democratic-run House. The reparations debate began in Congress 32 years ago, but never got this far. The committee's action was prompted by the outrage over the death of George Floyd last year. No, it was prompted by ADOS. ADOS and the black media made reparations a national conversation, period. And it was before George Floyd, all that happened to him. So the committee's action was prompted by George Floyd last year while in Minneapolis police custody, as well as other incidents involving police and unarmed black men. Like, they probably finally did something because of the George Floyd incident, but the conversation happened way before that, like probably the year or 2 year prior to that, because of Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. So let's give, and I would say William Darity at the time too, because he was working with them. So let's give credit where credit is due. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law in September legislation calling for a task force to make recommendations on how reparations could be made. It can also suggest how to end state laws and policies that may encourage discrimination and whether to issue a formal apology for quote-unquote gross human rights violations and crimes against humanity to African slaves and their ancestors. We're asking for people to understand the pain, the violence, the brutality, the chattelness of what we went through. Okay, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, you are not African American. I love how black immigrants just slide their ass in there. You did not go through this. You weren't here. You weren't here. You weren't allowed to come to America until like the 60s when the immigration bill that African Americans fought for to allow your ass to come over here. You were not even here in the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s. But I love how they always slide their ass into the conversation. Do not let that be missed. And they could call you xenophobic, whatever. It's hard for me to be xenophobic when I'm from Africa, too. So anyways, the bill's chief sponsor. And, of course, we're asking for harmony to come together as Americans. Lee's bill would create a commission, but the legislation does not specify how reparations could or would be paid or precisely to whom exactly. Like, who's getting this money? Because I'm pretty sure Lee is going to find a way to slide her ass into it. We need our own ADOS caucus. So it is labeled House Bill 40 or H.R. 40, a reference to the unsuccessful government bid to provide 40 acres of land and a mule to free slaves as the Civil War ended. The new panel would examine slavery and discrimination in the colonies in the United States from 1619 to the present and recommend appropriate remedies. Republicans thought all this was largely unnecessary. Of course they did. It is evil in its effect, if not in its intent. I don't know what would be evil about repairing what this country did to us. What's evil is not repairing, not paying reparations, pretending. Just keep trying to pretend the shit never happened. Keep pretending, because this shit will never go away. This country is going to fall apart and continue to collapse. It will never go away. We will never forget the injustice. You guys have tried to lie and hide and not teach CRT, critical race theory. You've tried over and over again to teach lies, and it never fucking works. It never works. Each new generation, we find out the truth, and you are doomed because the internet came, and now it's a wrap. Now it's a complete wrap. But African Americans, it's up to you guys to teach our children the truth, because these schools aren't going to do it. So it's holding people of one age responsible for the ills of another. Not quite. It's holding the government responsible. And it's still the same U.S. government. They made it legal to enslave people. So that the Supreme Court's still around. And they try to do this ignorant gaslighting of, oh, the people who own slaves are dead. Yeah, but their families aren't. And this country's still here, alive and well. And they said they're trying to do this based on their will of their conduct, but not on their race. And we're paying reparations to so many people. African Americans are paying money to so many people with our tax dollars in this country that we built. And we don't owe you shit. We haven't done shit to Jews and Native Americans and all these groups, Japanese. No, we haven't. Why are we paying anything to anybody? We shouldn't even have to fucking pay taxes. Until recently, McClintock said the country had been making tremendous progress towards a colorblind society. We don't want to be colorblind. You weren't colorblind when you enslaved my ancestors. Don't become colorblind now when it's time to pay us back for 400 years of free labor. But he said it's true that very damaging and unwise policies have disproportionately impacted black communities. No shit. So the answer is to change those policies, not to excuse them because their ideology is pleasing to the left, he said. The commission, McClintock argued, could be divisive. The commission, McClintock argued, could be divisive. You say this is healing. It's precisely the opposite, he said. No, it's healing. Issa cited practical concerns. What about others from racial and minority groups who have been hurt by discrimination? Why don't they start their own case? Everybody else is being paid separately, like these illegal immigrants. What does this have to do with us? And let's guess that Issa is probably a black American. A black immigrant. So the challenge of a commission, Issa said, is that supporters have already decided the outcome of the commission. What about trying to figure out just who might qualify? Here we go. He cited Vice President Kamala Harris, whose heritage is both black, her father's Jamaican and South Asian. So she's not American. She's not African American. She is black American. She's Jamaican American. She's Jamaican Indian American. She's not ADOS in any way, shape, or form. And he said, how will that be calculated? Everyone with all the stupid questions. So Democrats urged colleagues to see the bigger picture. Lofgren told the committee how her father, the son of an immigrant and military veteran, was able to buy a little tiny house with a GI loan after World War II. Black people often did not get to buy the little houses like my dad did. Remember, she said, the commission is about who was denied opportunities and how do we look at it, making sure everybody in America is being treated fairly. That's what this commission is about, she said. We don't know what the answer may be. It's easy. Just pay us our goddamn money.
You know, I find myself once again in the same position as President Obama. We both oppose reparations, and we both are the descendants of slaveholders.
And this is the level of hate that this country has for black people. So this is what Mitch McConnell said about reparations for black people back in 2007. So Mitch McConnell said he finds himself once again in the same position as President Obama. McConnell told reporters, we both oppose reparations. We both are the descendants of slave owners. In 2007, genealogists reported that Obama, whose black father was Kenyan and whose white mother was from Kansas, has slave-owning ancestors on his maternal side. Last month, McConnell said he did not think reparations were a good idea, noting that no one currently alive is responsible for slavery, but yet the government is. We still have the same American government. They were the ones who made slavery legal, as well as the Supreme Court, which we also still have. So sitting here trying to, just like with the illegal immigrants, they're going back to Trump's policies when he was president. So we're going to go also back to the American government, and that justifies whatever they try to say that will stump that out, because America still exists. And like someone else said in their comments, which was very intelligently said, was it's not like we're talking about the Greek or Roman Empire that has fallen. Yes, America does appear to be falling, rightly so, because of just how evil it is. I guess it's seeing its own karma, but whether it fails or not, the reality is it's still here right now. And the same government that allowed slavery in so many different capacities, along with other things that oppressed black people, ADOS peoples for centuries up all the way to today, that's the same government. The government hasn't changed. It's the same people in government. And it's not the same people exactly, but that's the same United States government that allowed that. And it's the same government today that's opposing reparations to the people that they had, the descendants of the people that they enslaved. The government hasn't changed at all. They said House Democratic leaders in June said they would hold a floor vote on legislation to create a commission that would study and develop reparations proposals for the descendants of black slaves.